So in this video, we're going to talk about reflections and imperfections and scratches and just a little bit more about surfaces. And first, we're going to start off with, I guess, reflections. And the good starting point is always going to be some kind of glass material. And there's different ways you can do that. So if I just go to new and create a basic principled BSDF, it's typically how I do it. Now, there are some options on Blender. If I go to add and I go down to shader, there's different types. And we can kind of look at some of these. We're going to look at some of these volume ones later on. But you can also do a glass texture, which kind of has some of these settings already set up. I don't typically like doing this way. They can sometimes run into issues when you're exporting them out to a game engine or a different piece of software, but they are pretty handy and they kind of focus on certain tasks. You can do a lot of that within this Pencil BSDF. One of the first things we'll look at is using this alpha. So if I bring down the alpha, what that's going to do is it's going to bring down how transparent or opaque this thing is. So the lower the number on my alpha, the more transparent that's going to be. Now, I can also mess with the roughness, and it'll do the same thing. The more rough something is, the less shiny it'll be. So if I crank this all the way down, and then if I bring up stuff like metallic, which again, it's going to make it a little more shiny, this thing starts looking like a nice reflective piece of grass. You can also mess with this IOR setting as well. And then the thing about glass is, in most surfaces, really once you start leaning into is like nothing is perfect. So the most imperfections you can kind of add into your textures, the more interesting and believable they're going to be. And the easiest way to do that is adding in stuff, through your um, roughness texture. So I like to just even look up like smudges or scratches, and it's going to give us like this black and white texture that we can use to affect how shiny as certain things are in certain areas. So if I drag and drop this smudges texture into my scene, and then I'm going to let's make sure this is on non-color. So it'll probably import it as RGB. And then you're going to take this and bring it over into the roughness. And what this is going to do is anything that is white is going to make it rough. Anything that's black is going to make it not rough, reflective. And that's kind of how some of these smudges are going to work in real life too. And you kind of notice it makes a little bit more interesting details in there. And you can always, if you want to scale it up, go on your UV settings and make it, fit to whatever shape and form you want. But again, this adds a little bit more interest and makes it, again, more believable. The more, I think of these imperfections you can add to your own textures, again, the more interesting it's going to look. And this doesn't have to be just for glass, right? I tend to do this for all of my textures and surfaces. This is to kind of play with the roughness in a way that kind of makes it look imperfect, like throwing a scratch or a smudge texture over the top of my roughness. Will kind of add a little bit more. So let's do it again to our table we were working on earlier. And then if I drop that again in my roughness, again, it adds a little bit more of like these subtle, if you can kind of see as I rotate this around, depending how the light hits it, which makes it a lot more interesting than if I were to just have it um, without it. And you can, again, you could do this even if you wanted to, you could affect different aspects of it. And on that point too, you can always paint over the top of some of your other um, textures as well, your existing ones. So if I wanted to paint over the top of my wood and I wanted to add some like wear marks or scratches and kind of actually add that on and use this as a starting point rather than, trying to recreate this wood pattern all on my own, which would take me forever. And then I can go through and add, one of my more interesting brushes. One of these. Then actually add it to my texture mask. If you ever notice you can't paint and it's not working the way you want, check your normals. And that's the way that your faces are facing. So if I go over to modeling, and if I go up here under my viewport layout, I have this check mark um, that says face orientation. That shows which way my faces are facing. So if it's going to be red, that means it's inverted. So these are facing not the way I want. So I can go to um, mesh normals and I can flip these. So now if I go back over to texture painting, I can paint just fine. And that's a little bit harsh. So what I'll do is I'll turn this down strength a little bit. So it's a little bit more subtle, maybe even get more detail. And like, you try to think about, okay, where's the wear on the table? It's going to be, in these on the edges and stuff like that. I mean, I could even probably shrink this down a little bit and do something like that, or even go really big and just do a couple, might even get more of a scratch texture in there as well, less of a splatter, and add a little bit more, again, subtle roughness and a little bit more interesting in this texture.